Yes guys, it's that time once again, and F1 Esports is back on the agenda. This week I believe we have event number 3 coming up, and also we have an F1 Esports event on the F1 game. So this one's been out for a little while now, and it's a USA event driving as Lando Norris in the McLaren, and we'll jump into that very shortly. But first of all guys, I want to quickly mention my intention is not to get into esports. I think I've got a lot of respect for those drivers, and even though I think I'm pretty quick, I wouldn't have the mental capacity to compete with those guys before I get a million comments saying you should go for F1 Esports. But as always, as is tradition on this channel, we are going to give it a crack and see if we can get into the top 10. I've done it on last year's game, I've done it on the previous event, which I'll leave linked up here in the top right hand corner, which was at Monza, and we're going to do it again this time. So we're going to jump into it. Hopefully you guys do go on to enjoy the video. These videos often do pretty well on the channel, so once again I urge you guys to like the video and subscribe for more. I'm hoping to hit 55k subs guys by the end of the year, so any help would be hugely appreciated guys. So hit that red subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's get into the event because it's quite an exciting one. Here we are then on the F1 game now, and you can see the event. It's at the Circuit of the Americas, racing as Lando Norris. But first of all, let's have a quick browse of the leaderboard because I recognise pretty much all the names on here. So Sven Zerner, F1 Esports of course back in the past, Cpos Patrick, I raced with him recently in an AOI League race as well. Josh Idaru or Surprise, also of course a very quick driver, Vallejo. I believe both of these guys also F1 Esports Pro Draft drivers. Nicolas Mateo as well. Jona Otmir of course. VSR Kevin. I recognise Padlo Futes, all these guys pretty much, Paris, Zanarme, Lucas UK. So I'm hoping to be in the mix. That's where I hope to be because I race with these guys in league racing. So I think anywhere in the top 20 would be a good result for me, and that's where I'm hoping to be. So yeah, that's the leaderboard situation. We then jump into the actual event, and we're going to first of all do the difficulty. Now as you can see, we're going to run with all the assists off as always because that gives you the highest possible score. We're then going to turn flashbacks off, park from 8 on, race starts manual, but the difficulty of course we're going to crank that up to 110 of course, because if you're going to try and qualify for esports, you've got to max it out. So yeah, let's jump into it and let's get this underway. Well, let's read what the challenge is, and its objective: finish in 7th place or higher. Qualifying for the F1 2021 Esports Series, can Lando Norris take P7 or improve to P6 and change history of the 2019 Formula 1 US Grand Prix? This is a points-based event. Points will be awarded based on skill, speed, difficulty and assist setting, with additional points rewarded for clean racing. So as always with these events, the format is exactly the same for every single one. So you've got to make sure you run the hardest difficulty, no assist. Make sure you pick up no warnings for track limits, which could be a problem around USA. And yeah, we're going to jump into it. Now in terms of setup for this video, I don't have an ideal setup for USA. My own one is okay, but it's not to the level where I need to be that quick. So I'm going to run one of my league racing setups that I've used in my league racing season so far. I might just make a couple of tweaks for this track and hope that can do the trick. I'm not sure which setup that will be yet. I'll kind of get there in the end. I'm thinking maybe Bahrain as a setup, maybe France in terms of what I want to use, and then kind of adjust that a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to jump into it and see how we get on. First of all though, we're going to crack on with the default setup and see how that goes. Here we are then in the event, and as you can see, this is my first attempt. Now straight away I realized very early on that the default setup was not possible in this particular event because the 110 AI around here are actually pretty strong. So it's really hard, if not impossible, unless you're an F1 Esports driver, to probably pull this off with a default setup, because I was actually losing time to Sainz and Ocon behind was starting to catch me. And also with default setup there's a lot of understeer, so I was picking up a lot of warnings for track limits. So to be fair, I didn't even finish the first attempt on default setup because I realised that it's actually not possible. You have to finish at least P7 to complete the challenge, and I was nowhere near that. So yeah, I believe I got one more warning for track limits, which was this one you're about to see, and I pretty much quit to the main menu and started again because this was not the way to go. We then move on to my second attempt, and actually I managed to complete this one. It wasn't perfect, I got a couple of warnings for track limits, but a few things to note. So on this one I was using a custom setup that was given to me by TRL Limitless. The setup in itself was actually a Canadian Grand Prix setup, but I just made a few tweaks and adjustments for it because of course this track isn't like Canada, so I had to make a few changes to it. But generally speaking, straight away I could feel a huge difference in terms of turn-in and just corner speed. I was a lot quicker, and you can see now I was actually catching up to Science and pulling away from Ocon quite easily. So I knew straight away that I was going to be able to finish this attempt and have no issues. Now, we're closing in on Carlos Sainz, end of lap 52, and we're going to get DRS for the first time on the pit straight. We also sit, I believe, just shy of what's a personal best, so the pace was actually pretty consistent. The medium tyres last quite a long time. Into turn 1, big send on the brakes, and a slight bump there, a little bit of contact, but luckily no warning for contact, which is really important to avoid. We then skip a little bit later. You can see Hamilton sets a new fastest lap, and we pick up a warning for cutting the left-hander, and I believe that would be my final warning. We actually set a new personal best at the end of lap 53, going on to lap 54, and then all the way now onto the last lap of the race, I was able to catch Daniel Ricciardo, and this is what you need to be doing. You need to be at least ahead of Ricciardo and finishing P6, you know, at minimum in this challenge to be anywhere near the top positions. So even though the challenge says finishing P7, realistically you need P6, and you can see here we cut back underneath, nice little slice inside on the Australian, and we move up into 6th place with just a few corners to go, and that is going to complete my first full attempt. And to be fair, it wasn't too bad. Now, again, worth noting, I didn't really optimize the overtakes, therefore I lost a lot of time behind Sainz and Ricciardo. I didn't optimize the DRS timing either. I also could have done better with ERS, and then on top of that I actually picked up 2 warnings for track limits. And then the final thing to note is the fastest lap. Now, I feel like you get a lot of the score. You can see on screen, you get around 30 to 40,000 points depending on what you do in terms of best lap score. So you need to make sure that your fastest lap is like a really good lap. So I do recommend training most of your ERS deployment and fuel on a single lap, and preferably when the tires are fresher, maybe when you have DRS assistance. Either way, that was my first full attempt, 760,000 points, and at the time that gave me, I believe, 67th in the world, so top 70, but still not where I want to be. We then move on to my next attempt. I had a few more after that second one, and this was the next kind of good one I had. With this one, I tweaked the setup, so instead of using a Canada-based setup, I actually used, I believe it was, I think it might have been a France-based setup, because I used it recently in my league racing, and I just tweaked it a little bit. So straight away you can see the difference. So lap 52, the exact same lap as before, going to lap 53, we're on the back of Sainz. This time though, I opted to go to the outside to try something different. Also worth noting, my fastest lap was actually quicker than the previous one as well. So I was a lot better on this attempt. We get past Sainz around the outside of turn 1, and we lost no time. We then cut on to the end of lap 54, a new personal best, and we're already just 1.2 seconds behind Ricciardo. So bear in mind, it took me until the last lap to get past Ricciardo on the previous attempt. This time, we're behind him a whole lap earlier, but this time again, unfortunately, the timing wasn't right. So you can see I'm getting held up throughout this entire section, and this is costing me time. I'm currently on 2 personal best first and second sectors, and I just can't get by. You know, I'm losing a lot of time, and it's actually going to ruin my personal best and third sector, but I can't really get past Ricciardo here. So again, we had such a good first 4 or 5 laps, but then this lap right here, just being stuck behind the Renault, completely ruined the attempt. So again, frustrating, but luckily we do manage to get a good exit out of the final corner, and we used the very last bit of the ERS to get the run. We're going to go to the outside and try and go for a carbon copy of the overtake we did on Sainz a lap before, and there we go, we're through, and we get the entire final lap to just push absolutely flat out, use up the rest of the fuel and the ERS, and give it everything basically. And to be fair, the actual final lap wasn't that bad. We ended up pulling up a 1.5 second gap to Ricciardo as we come up to the checkered flag. And worth noting, on this attempt, there was no warnings for track limits, so this was a much better attempt. 770,000 points, and I believe this gave me 21st in the world, so this was much more on the money. And actually, it might have been 17th, I can't remember exactly, but you can see a lot better, a much higher best lap score as well, and this is more like it. So that was a pretty standard attempt in terms of what you should be aiming for, and we're now going to move on to our final attempt, which was the really key one, so we're going to watch it in full. Now, after that previous attempt, I tried lots of things to get it right, and I kept on failing. Eventually, I actually lowered my front and rear wing by 1, so I was running a lot more straight line speed. Now, let's talk about the attempt and a few tips and tricks. So straight away, when you start, it's important to go up to rich mix and maybe use a bit of overtake on the back straight as you're halfway down it and you're not really up to full speed. At this point, it's important to maximize the first 1.5 laps. So what I mean by that is you need to make sure the rest of lap 50, which is this lap right here, is absolutely on point, and then the next lap has to be really good as well, because that's going to bring you close to Carlos Sainz. So you need to use the freshness in the tyres essentially to really work. So this is probably the trickiest stage, because you need to really maximize the pace. And you can see here as we cross the line, a 34.2 was by far my best initial start lap as a reference guide, and we're now going to embark on what is my first full lap here, and what I'm hoping to be the fastest lap. So at the final corner, getting a nice clean exit using ERS straight out of turn 1. Rich mix, I then knock it down to standard, going into the S section. With this challenge, you're going to find you're going to have a lot of fuel left in the reserve. You can't really burn that off, because otherwise you're going to overheat the engine. So don't worry about fuel too much. We go 4.5 tenths up in the first sector. Important through here to open up the right, to get that run through the left and get the power down nice and early. And we've made up a lot of time as we now go down towards the hairpin brake. Just after the 100-meter ball, down to second gear, pick up a late apex and really focus on the traction out of here. And at this point now, it's up to you, but you can really, really drain the battery. And that's something I may wish I would have done, just to try and, go better, basically, and go a lot quicker. We then brake just bang on the 50-meter ball. You can cut this left-hander a lot, so be really aggressive over the curb and to try and maximize your lap time. 9 tenths up, as you can see right now, through the second sector split. We then make our way through the double right and the double left. Again, trying not to lock up, trying to make sure we keep our tyres in good condition. Traction out of here, critical. Overtake out of there as well, really important to really give you a good bit of straight line speed. Heading through here, and I'm currently 1.4 behind Carlos, which is not too bad. Now making your way through the penultimate corner, very easy to run wide and extend the track limits. And then the final corner, picking up the apex, back on the gas. And at this point, I would have liked to have had DRS. That would have been pretty good, but I wasn't quick enough. We do set a pretty strong lap though, 33.4. So that was actually really, really good. I was happy with that lap. Can do better. I could have drained a lot more ERS, but I knew I was going to have to pass Carlos Sainz this lap, so I wanted to save some in the reserve to pass him. So here we are then, lap 52, going through the S's, making sure now we try and close in on Carlos and get within that 1 second window, and we can get DRS, of course, at the detection point as we make our way through the right and the left at the top of the hill, and then we start to plunge downhill, get that big snap of oversteer there, but luckily we don't lose too much time. And because I tweaked the setup and I've got a bit more straight line speed this time, I'm able to actually keep up a bit better on the straight and be a bit more competitive. We then get a pretty good exit actually out the hairpin, and I'm well within range here, so we crank up the engine modes, overtake, rich mix, and to be fair, I struggled to get close to him on the straight as much as I would have liked. So that meant on the brakes I had to go for a bit of a lunge here to get this one done. Luckily we still get it slowed down, hit the apex, and keep it actually pretty clean, setting a purple second sector in the process, and nearly 3 tenths up. So at this point I was focused on making sure we just hold on to that 3/10 advantage, because that could potentially improve my fastest lap time even more. In hindsight, I wish I'd used a bit more ERS on this lap to really drain the battery, because this is probably the lap you want. So the one where you make the overtake on Sainz and get DRS, that's going to give you, of course, the super quick lap time. So you need to make sure you maximize it as we run a bit wide through the final corner, but we cross the line using ERS all the way up to the start finish, and we set a 33.1, which would be my best lap of the event. So we're now at lap 53. We've done the fastest lap and we've got past Carlos Sainz. Now we've got to set about catching up to Daniel Ricciardo. We've got this lap and 3 more after this to do it, so plenty of time to catch up to the Aussie. Leclerc's impossible, he's a bit too far ahead. You're not going to catch him unless you're an absolute alien, but I don't think that's possible. I don't think no one's ever done that. But we still push on, so you can see personal best first sector on this lap, so we're giving it everything. And this is the beauty of these events. It's the constant battle of attrition, because just when you think that you've done the hard work, you've set a couple of purple laps, you've got past Carlos Sainz nice and early, you think the battle's done, but you've got to keep pushing. And more importantly, the tyres at this point start to go, so track limits becomes a bit of an issue in terms of trying to keep the car within the white lines, and then that becomes a factor later on, because you're trying to push and find lap time all the time, but without breaking or breaching track limits. You can see here currently I'm about half a second down this lap, and the reason being, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm actually not using any ERS because I'm trying to save a little bit, so when I catch up to Ricciardo I've got enough ERS to get past. So that's what I'm trying to do, because I've noticed I'm a bit down on straight line speed, at least with this setup, because I think if I had an actual USA setup I probably would be a lot stronger, and I could do better. But for now, it is what it is, basically. As Sebastian Vettel said, of course, infamously, it is what it is. So lap 54 then, another lap ticked off. That one quite way off the pace, but still relatively quick in the sense that, you know, the gap to Ricciardo now 2.3 seconds when it was about 4 seconds a lap ago. So we're absolutely flying here. We've dropped signs. He's now 3 seconds behind us. And ideally, you want to be catching Ricciardo at the end of this lap, heading on to lap 55. If you're there, that's going to be really, really good for you. So yeah, we're going to keep pushing. Another personal best, first sector again, keeping up that consistency. And to be fair, tyres do hold on pretty well around here. You just got to make sure you don't lock up. Make sure you don't slide, don't half spin, because if you slide or overheat these tyres, it's going to be really hard to get them down to temperature again. So you want to make sure you keep that temperature absolutely perfect. Again, another good exit out of there. I'm actually using a tad bit of VRS because I'm realising I need to get closer to Ricciardo because I need to be passing him on lap 55. So I need to get that gap a bit smaller because we're losing so much on the straights because we can't use, you know, ERS like I would do. So I'm having to make it all up in the corners. This lap though is a lot stronger than the previous one as we're getting closer and closer, just chipping away at that gap to Ricciardo, which goes from 1.6 down to about 1.4, 1.3 on the exit there of that double left-hander. And again, just constantly chipping away. I think through here, ideally, it would be quite nice to get DRS on Ricciardo. That line you just saw is the detection point, but I wasn't quite close enough. As we head through the final corner, the gap drops just below a second. So we're in the mix, and we're doing pretty well now, and we are going to get DRS this lap. So now it's all about closing up as much as possible, really, and trying to get the move done on the back straight. So if you guys remember, on my previous attempts, we passed Ricciardo on the last lap twice. So for once, we're actually going to pass him on this lap, lap 55, which is a lap earlier. So the setup adjustments have worked well, giving me a bit more straight line speed, and it hasn't cost me too much through the corners. And you can see here again, just gaining time everywhere on Ricciardo now. We actually didn't do the best job through there. I went in a bit too hot into the right-hander, and then it compromised my exit slightly. But then I absolutely sent one on the brakes to really close the gap there, and I absolutely nailed it, and also got some pretty good traction as well. So here we go then, overtake mode, and also rich mix and the DRS. We don't really have any ERS left over. I'm trying to save that last bit for when it really matters, but you guys know what's about to go down. On the brakes, huge lunge down the inside and just committing, and the fact you can cut the left-hander before, like I said, you can cut that corner a lot, allows you to really go into that corner quite shallow in terms of an angle, and you're not going to be compromised too badly. So we get past Ricciardo with about a lap and a quarter to spare. So this is the best attempt so far, the earliest I've got by, and no warnings for track limits importantly as well. So at this point, you know, you can get quite inside your own head and think to yourself, okay, we've done it. You know, we've done the overtakes all nice and early, all nice and clean, and then you can just switch off for 1 second and pick up a warning for track limits. There's so many corners around here where you can get punished. You know, the S's are very easy to do so, the penultimate corner as well. So at this point, it's about keeping your head, staying cool, and just trying to, you know, eke it out. This is the last lap now, so I'm going to just try and get everything out of the car, use the very last bit of fuel, the last bit of ERS, you know, try and get everything out of the tyres, and make sure you leave no time on the table whilst trying to make sure you don't pick up any warnings or track limits. You can see there, a personal best first sector, keeping it nice and tidy through there. Hamilton does take away our fastest lap, which is a bit of a shame. I noticed he's able to do a 1:32 in all the attempts I did, so that seems to be the locked in lap time. 1:32.9 seems to be the lap Hamilton does. So if you want to try and take away the fastest lap, you need to be able to do a 32.8 or a low 0.9 yourself. So I think I could do that, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, using the DRS from signs. Maybe it is possible. You've got to time it absolutely perfectly. Either way, it's still pushing here, cutting that corner nicely, and just trying to get everything out of the car here. And we're now about 3.5 tenths down, of course, because we didn't have DRS on the back straight. So you've got to make sure you nail this final sector. And at this point, you know, the tyres are at its most worn, and you're trying to hang on as much as you can, using now all the ERS through here to get that exit speed, using a bit more as well actually on the exit of the triple right-hander. We then go down a couple of gears, penultimate corner, throw the car in, a bit more ERS once again, and then approaching the final corner, making sure the traction out of there is perfect, and using the rest of the ERS up to the line. We set a purple sector 3 as well to close it out, so that's exactly what you want. And we finished the event P6 and a really strong final lap, which does mean, as you can see with the final results, we got the second quickest time overall. So Bottas isn't really a factor in this, it's mainly Hamilton. And I feel like this attempt could have been a lot higher up if I'd managed to do a 32.9 low. If I'd got the fastest lap, I would have got a lot more points, because I've noticed the fastest lap is very important in these events. It gives you a lot more points. And yeah, we finished P6 at 33.177 is my final lap. And we then move into the event points, and we ended with 773,000, which is the highest so far. We got a best lap score of 39,500 as well, and generally it was pretty much a flawless attempt. And now I'm going to throw it back now to live commentary version of me when I recorded this, because this did land me inside the top 10. So let's have a look and let's see where I stack up in the leaderboards. Yes guys, we've done it, and after a couple of attempts we managed to get there in the end. Considering I wasn't using a full-on USA setup, I'm actually quite happy with that one. The overtakes weren't perfect. I think we lacked a bit of straight line speed, but still a very, very good one. I feel like with these events, what really is an important factor and something you need to keep in mind, and I've realised this now after 2 events, the fastest lap is very important in terms of gaining score. So you need to make sure you pretty much use all your ERS on one lap to really make sure that fastest lap is on point. I think to really guarantee a top 10, that event I just done right now, that run was perfect. All I had to do was probably find 2/10 on my actual fastest lap, and that's because I used too much ERS the lap before. So had I drained all my ERS on the exact same lap I passed signs, if I'd finished the race with the fastest lap to my name, that would have given me a much higher score, and I think easily a top 5. So yeah, I think that's definitely the key factor, guys. And obviously I could spend hours on this trying to do it, but ultimately this is just a video, and I'm not too keen about qualifying for F1 Esports. Either way, it's a top 9, the highest placement I've had in a long time, if not maybe ever. I don't think I've actually broken into the top 10. I've been 11th, 12th, 13th, 17th, but 9th is brand new for me. So yeah guys, I'm really happy with that one. But guys, give me your, your scores in the comments down below, and give it a go. Let me know what you thought. If you enjoyed this video, then smash the like button, guys, and subscribe for more content like this. There might be more events in the future. So last year there was 4 events. There should be 2 more after this. So I'll try and do those as well. So subscribe for that. And also daily content, my team every other day on the channel, guys, and some league racing content, which is weekly. But guys, thank you for watching, and check out the 2 videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. And I'll see you all next time for another video. But until then, take care, and it's goodbye from me.